Welcome to Everyday Linux User. Today I'm going to be reviewing Debian Linux. So Debian is one of the grandfathers of Linux. It is the distribution that other distributions are built on top of. So we'll start off with the Debian website. This is vastly improved over the years. It used to be a mess of links, but now you can see that there's a massive download button and there's links of why use Debian, user support, security updates and more. And so this is a vastly improved website. So why Debian? And it gives you reasons. It's free software, it's stable, secure, extensive hardware support, etc, etc. And I'm going to go into more detail about what Debian is and what Debian isn't from an everyday Linux user point of view later in this review. But for now, the reason for reviewing Debian is as follows. I'm going to close that. I've been working my way down this list on DistroWatch. DistroWatch, if you haven't heard of it before, is a website dedicated to Linux distributions. Tells you all the latest distributions, latest headlines, latest packages. It's a little bit of blurb about each distribution, and down the right hand side here you've got the page hit ranking, and this is for each distribution what have people been clicking on. So I have reviews for MX, Endeavour, Mint, Manjaro, Pop, Fedora and Ubuntu. So today it's the turn of Debian. So it's number 8 on the list. Don't let that fool you into thinking it's not a great distribution, because it is a great distribution. Whether it's suitable for you, that's something we'll discuss later on in the guide, but it is a powerful distribution. As far as I'm concerned, it's one of the two major distributions that the world couldn't live without. A big statement there. Okay, so let's start off with the installation. Now I have a video coming out which is going to show you how to install Debian. That will be coming out in the next few hours. You can get that from youtube.com/everydaylinuxuser. So this is my channel, but let's talk about the installer. The installer, compared to other installers, looks a bit archaic. It's far better than the Fedora one. Don't let you be fooled by that. It's whilst it looks a little bit old, it's fully functional. It's not as obvious perhaps as when you're installing Ubuntu, Manjaro, Mint or one of those distributions, or indeed Pop OS. So what happens is in general it's good. You still choose your installation language, where you're from and things like that, but there are extra settings that it asks you to choose, and some of them aren't so obvious. So there's a point where it says enter your root password, and if you enter a root password at that point, when you get to the main desktop as I am now, you'll realise the sudo command doesn't work. But if you read that installation page correctly, what it's saying is if you enter a root password, you are not added to the sudoers file. So it's about reading the screen and reading what it's telling you. So it recommends entering a root password, but if you want to be added to the sudoers file, you have to either not enter a root password during the installation, or after the installation you then have to go and add yourself manually to the sudoers file. It's not a massive deal. I've got a tutorial coming for that, but it's something worth noting. It's part of the installer. Other things with the installer, the partitioning maybe not as obvious as it is with other distributions. Then it asks you whether you're attached to a proxy server or not. Most other distributions don't ask that. Now that can be a good or a bad thing, because if you are using a proxy server, then Debian's one step ahead of the other distributions. I'm not sure. I don't use proxy servers, so I'm not sure how Ubuntu or Mint or Manjaro deal with that situation. Uh, Possibly something worth exploring. So that's the installation. The installation is not so you don't end up in a desktop like this and have the installer as a window on the screen as you do for other distributions. You're actually, as soon as you boot up, you're into that graphical install. So you're not trying the live image and then running the installer from there. You're actually in an installer as part of the boot sequence. So you boot and it's straight into that installer. Now, there are two types of installer. There's a graphical installer and a text-based installer, but essentially most people probably go for the graphical one, unless you don't have the capabilities to display the graphics, I guess. So that's the installer. I want to talk about Debian as suitability for a everyday Linux user. So this channel is about people who want to use Linux as the main operating system, but they're not necessarily a tech head. They're not necessarily somebody who wants to be a programmer. They don't necessarily want to go into the terminal and have to write terminal commands. They just, maybe they've got an older laptop and they want to put Linux on there because Windows isn't suitable for it. Maybe they want to use Linux. They're a bit fed up with Windows. They just want to try something else out. What they don't want to be doing is editing this script, editing that script, running update commands via the terminal, installing new kernels and things like that. And from when you're using Debian, I can't say that you won't be doing things like that because, as in my case, you possibly will. So when I installed Debian, the first thing I had to do was add myself to the sudoers file because I did enter a root password at the root password install screen. The next thing I had to do was, like, if I wanted to install Flatpaks via the package manager, or I wanted to install non-free firmware, I had to edit the sources list, and I had to install Flatpak as well, so that I could do those things. Now that doesn't strike me as something a new user to Linux would want to do. They want to boot into the operating system, much like Pop OS. Go to the package manager, hey, I want Chrome, give me Chrome. They don't want to be, oh, you've got to open a terminal, you've got to open this file, oh, you've got to install this package, then you've got to reboot, you've got to do this, that, the other. So Debian from that point of view may not be the best suited for brand new users. It may not be suited for somebody who never wants to get their hands dirty. That doesn't make Debian a bad distribution at all, and I'm going to go into that in a little while. So another thing that I had to do with Debian was my Wi-Fi didn't work, so I had to enable Debian backports, and that enabled me to update my kernel, which then got my Wi-Fi working, and I've got a tutorial showing how to do that. So I've got a tutorial for the three things I mentioned thus far: the sudoers file, adding Flatpak, and fixing your Wi-Fi by installing the newest kernel. Bluetooth was another thing altogether, and I can't give you a guide for that right now because it took me a little while to get it working, and I'm not quite sure at the end of the day what the thing was that got it working. So whilst I have it working now, I'm not 100% sure what got me there. So I think I would have to reinstall Debian and start again, and then see if I can follow the steps I did before to get the Bluetooth working. There are guides on the internet, but none of them specifically worked. I don't know which mixture of the guides got me to the point where it's working. So that's that. So if this is the case, why do I think Debian is a good distribution? Well, Debian's more than just a desktop Linux distribution. It's used for servers. It's used for it's the base of a huge amount of other distributions out there. Ubuntu is based on Debian. Linux Mint is based on Debian. Pop OS is based on Debian. If you look at the top 10, they're based on one or two distributions. It's either Arch or it's Debian. There are the exceptions, Fedora being that exception, but in majority of cases they're based on either Debian or Arch, and I think Debian and Arch, for that reason, are two of the most important distributions out there. If one or the other of those decides to disappear overnight, then it's going to leave a massive hole in the ecosystem for a huge number of other Linux distributions. So Debian is incredibly important. And once you get used to Debian, Debian is like Linux Lego. You can use it to build your system any way you want to. And it's great. So what I've got in front of me now is Debian on a Cinnamon desktop, but I could have Debian with OpenBox, with a Cairo dock, with I could use any window manager I want. I can use systemd. I don't have to use systemd. I can configure Debian to be exactly what I want it to be. So that brings me back to the installer again. Other installers, say for Ubuntu, you'd get given the desktop environment. If you want to install another one, you can, but you get given GNOME. You can use Xubuntu, which will give you XFC. You can use Lubuntu, which will give you LXDE, LXQT. You can use Kubuntu, which gives you KDE. So, but they're all separate distributions around the same thing, around the same theme. Mint gives you Cinnamon. Manjaro, you choose the desktop when you're downloading the ISO image. Debian is different. When you're in the installer, you choose which desktop environment or environments that you want at the install stage. Not only that, you choose whether you want the Debian applications with that desktop. So I could install the Cinnamon desktop and have none of the applications that Debian have collated as part of that desktop. As it happens, I've actually installed Cinnamon and I've installed the Debian default applications, because I want to show you what you do get for when you install Debian with a desktop. I've chosen Cinnamon. I could have gone for GNOME, but I've done a lot of GNOME recently and I thought I'd try something different, and I wanted to compare Debian Cinnamon to perhaps Linux Mint Cinnamon, and also I've got a guide on the Cinnamon desktop coming out in the next week or two. So that's what makes Debian great. It's not necessarily perfect for the new user, but it's perfect for all those distro maintainers who want to start their own distribution and they want a base. Debian is that base. And yeah, so waffling over, let's have a look at what we've got with regards to Debian. So I've gone for the Cinnamon desktop. It's worth pointing out performance wise. I'm going to compare the performance of Debian to Ubuntu, Mint and Pop! OS. Compared to Ubuntu, Ubuntu is a snail and Debian is a cheetah. Compared to Mint, Debian is a Ford Mustang and Linux Mint is perhaps a Jeep Cherokee. I don't know. I'm assuming a Mustang's faster than a Cherokee. Compared with Pop! OS, Debian is definitely faster than Pop! OS. That's not knocking Pop! OS, that's not knocking Linux Mint, by the way. I'm not going to say too much about Ubuntu, I'm not a huge fan. Linux Mint and Pop! OS are great for the everyday Linux user. They have the Debian ecosystem, where in Mint's case you have Ubuntu on top. But you can also have the desktop, the Debian version of Linux Mint as well. But Linux Mint and Pop! OS and other distributions are basically, they take Debian and they enhance it to a point where it gives you a certain user experience above and beyond the initial Debian experience, so that you don't have the little problems that you have, such as Wi-Fi drivers not working, or having to add a new kernel, having to enable Flatpaks, etc. This is base Debian, and so it is a bit faster than those distributions. So here we are, we've got Cinnamon. I've got my Wi-Fi working. I can show that now. My Wi-Fi is working. Have it turned off generally because I'm on a wired network. My Bluetooth is working. I'm going to prove that now. So that noise in the background is my Bluetooth speaker coming on. So if I go into devices, I'm hoping this is still going to work from the other day. And you can see it's connected. So down here we've got the cinnamon menu, and it works just like the Linux Mint one would. It's really quite a stylish menu, and so in each of these you can see the applications, and for Debian you get quite a lot. So these are the accessories you get. I'm not going to go through them all. Games, you get quite a lot of little games. Graphics, you get the GIMP package for image manipulation, image magic as well, Inkscape, you get Linux Office Draw, Shotwell. Under Internet, you get Firefox as the web browser, HexChat, which is the IRC chat. I don't know how many people still use that sort of thing, but I know it's used for support purposes, so that's why it's installed. Internet Messenger, I'm not sure how many people use those things anymore either. Ramina is for remote desktops, so you can remote onto other machines. Thunderbird email client, and then you've got a BitTorrent client as well. Under Office, you have the LibreOffice suite. Sound and video, you have a webcam viewer, which is Cheese. Kdenlive didn't come with this distribution. I had to install it because obviously I do video editing. In the same way, Simple Screen Recorder, that also didn't come installed. I had to install that in order to make this video. Then, therefore, you get Rhythmbox, which is the audio player, Sound Juicer, which enables you to copy your CDs to different formats, a sound recorder, which enables you to record your voice, and then a video player. And then down here we've got an administration tool, and you've got preferences, etc. So let's look at this Bluetooth speaker situation, see if that works. So I'm going to go into Rhythmbox, which is your audio player. You see it's quite responsive. I'm going to go into import. I've imported some free music, royalty-free music. Just try this out. Okay, I had to adjust the speaker slightly, but here we go. So as you can see, the Bluetooth speaker worked perfectly well. And Rhythmbox is a really good music player. You can add all your tunes in here, you can create playlists, you can add automatic playlists, there's podcasts, radio station, so podcasts you can add in and you can search. So I've done this before, search for Linux, and you can choose to listen to any of these Linux podcasts. There's radio stations for different types of music. I'm not really into trance, underground. Let's see what this is like. Oh dear. So that's Rhythmbox. This isn't really part, obviously, Debian. Rhythmbox is. It's a good choice of an application by Debian though to put in. They've basically gone for the big boys in terms of packages. GIMP is the best image editor in terms of internet. Firefox can't really go wrong. Office, LibreOffice, solid choice. Rhythmbox, solid choice for audio player. The video player, let's have a look at that. It's something I've had problems with other distributions. So if I add a local video in here and go to my videos, and we can choose, for instance, I've got my review sudo here. Is it going to play? Welcome to Everyday Linux User. In today's video I'm going to show you how, and you can see that came out of my speaker as well, so that worked perfectly well. So everything actually is working really well, and it's quite, it performs very well as well. We can go to Shotwell. And I'll put some photos in of my local area. You see them all coming through. So now I could do that. I can view it as a slideshow. You see all of them are really important now. Not the greatest photos, those ones. But there's some from May and March. and I really quite like these photos. So that shot well. Obviously you can change your background. Right click, change desktop background. This is more of a cinnamon thing than anything else. But I can go into my pictures here, and then you can see I've changed my background. So what about hardware support other than Bluetooth? I've also got printer, so these are the common things. You see it's picked up my printer straight away, so there's no problem on that front. Installing software, I mentioned earlier, I had to add in Flatpaks and I had to add in the non-free repositories. But now I've done that, if you've installed Cinnamon or GNOME, then you're going to have the software manager. So here we are, here's the software manager. And you can see because I've installed Flatpaks, I can now install common packages like Chrome. You can see where it's coming from. It's coming from the FlatHub. So that's that. It's going to install now. There's Steam as well. So here's Steam. Steam's available. You can install that. And when you do this, it'll queue them up. It doesn't try and download them all at once. So once you've got Debian up and running, like I have, it's actually really good. It just takes a little bit of tinkering to get it going in the first place. And I think that if you try and do anything too far out of the box, like if I wanted to run Windows software, not that I ever do, but if I wanted to run something like maybe the PokerStars app for running PokerStars, maybe that might not be so simple with Debian. I don't know, I haven't tried it. It's something I might try. But the point being is that with Debian you might have to work a little bit harder than you do with like your Mints or your Pop OSs and other distributions that are out there. But Debian is working. So Spotify is obviously going to be there because that's also a FlatHub, and I think Flatpaks have revolutionised the way Linux works, really, because in the past, if you couldn't get it from the main Debian repositories, or indeed this goes for other distributions as well, if you can get it from the main repositories, you were then searching for guides showing you how to do these things. But with the introduction of Flatpaks, every distribution has the chance to work and let you get to a point where you can install all the major software packages you want to install, because you run Flatpak, and as long as Flatpak's available for that distribution, you can then install all of these major packages. So that's a good shout out for FlatHub and Flatpak for that. So if I look at Chrome now, you can see it's installed, and if I go in, you have to reboot the first time that you use Flatpak after you've installed it, but Chrome appears in that menu there. If I go back to Steam, what I didn't show you was it actually installing. So I go to Steam, I click install, you can see it's preparing and now it's installing. So that's the software manager working. So that's how easy it is to install software after you've enabled Flatpaks. And that really is the end of the review. So to summarise, now I've already waffled on a lot about this, but Debian isn't for everyone. It's not necessarily for new users. It might not be for experienced users if all you want to do is run software and use your computer as your computer and not care about the intricacies of how it works, etc. But Debian is powerful. It is a great distribution. It's just not for everyone. And that's the end of the review. If you'd like to, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Linux User.